What comic books have made the biggest impact in the hobby? And is your favorite comic among them? I've teamed up with not one, but two comic book pros, Ben Labonog and Greg Holland, to come up with our 15 most impactful comic books. At number 15, I'll have Ben kick us off.
We have the infamous High Impact cover by Alex Schomburg, Suspense Comics number 3, which came out in 1944. When you look at the cover, you've got a full moon, you've got bondage, you got bats, you got spears, you got guns, you got hooded Nazis, you got a steamy jungle. It's no wonder that it's very coveted amongst Golden Age collectors, Schomburg collectors, war cover collectors, bondage collectors. There's a lot of overlap there.
All right, Ben, take us away for number 14 as well.
Hulk 181. Published in 1974, Wolverine is arguably one of the top 5 characters, possibly of all time. Blend of Ween, Romita, and Trimpe creating this character. And I think the oddity of Wolverine is that you never really fully understood who he was until the course of 20 years, right? They kept adding to his origin. So I think that makes the mystique of 181 even more powerful. Very popular, and I see it every generation. Everyone likes Wolverine.
I want to take number 13, which is Famous Funnies number 1. It's published by Eastern Color in July of 1934. Famous Funnies 1 is the first ever monthly comic book to hit the newsstand. The 10-cent price established the cost of a comic book for nearly 30 years. It wasn't until 1962 that the price went up to 12 cents.
Well, we're going to take a detour into the modern books just for a second and talk about Spawn number 1. It's from 1992. It is not from Marvel. It's not from DC. And those two knots are what make it special. If you go to a comic shop, you go to a comic convention, you're going to see Spawn 1. Todd McFarlane and others, artists, broke away from the Marvel and DC standards, created their own thing. Other publishers came out around the same time. But really, you had a third option, and Spawn number 1 really represents that third option.
And I know you love the next book too, Greg. What is it?
Next book is Ninja Turtles number 1. It came out in 1984, but it was handmade, for lack of a better description. Both creators worked on it, I believe, in their garage, stapling the pages together. Fewer than 3,300, I believe, were printed. Some say 3,000, but there was a little bit of overage. If you're talking about the first printing of the first issue of the Ninja Turtles, you're actually talking about fewer copies than Amazing Fantasy 15, which we will see later on the list.
Let's go way back in time to 1933, and we're talking about the publication of the first ever comic book, which is Funnies on Parade, No Number. And you might ask, what in the world does this comic book have to do with soap? Well, it turns out that the sponsor of this comic book was Procter & Gamble, and it was created as a giveaway. There are about 10,000 copies that were produced.
At number 9, we have Batman number 1, which was released in April of 1940. The whole Batman title was created entirely from unused stories from Detective Comics that they had planned. It featured the first appearance of the Joker and the Cat, or the Catwoman, at that time. It was out after Detective 38, which is first appearance of Robin, and before Detective 39. So they snuck it in there. You know, it's one of the most popular Golden Age keys of all time. I still think that book would have been better if the first Joker splash was used at the cover, holding the cards. I think that would have been fantastic.
Fantastic Four number 1 is that first book that kicked off what we consider the Silver Age for Marvel. Maybe not the most popular of the Marvel teams, maybe not the most popular of individual Marvel characters. But when we talk about Marvel, most people are thinking of Marvel as it has been since 1960, 1961.
All right, next up, we're going to get patriotic at number 7. Talking about Captain America comics. Number 1 came out in March of 1941, so before the debut of World War II, or at least before America got involved in World War II. The cover here is one of the most iconic in the entire hobby. It's got the fist of Captain America meeting the mustache of Hitler, and you can almost hear that smack. It's also worth mentioning that in the early days of Marvel, which was then called Timely, that Cap was part of the big 3. The Human Torch, Submariner, and then Cap came out.
Coming in at number 6 is Superman number 1, another highly coveted Golden Age key, printed in 1939. There were actually 3 printings of Superman 1. The first printing was 500,000 copies. You can tell because the house ad in the back of Action 14 says on sale June 2nd. So it was still coming. The other two printings were 250,000 and 150,000. And both of those ads in the back of the book say now on sale. So that's how you can tell. You can't differentiate between the second and third printing, unfortunately, but you can differentiate if it's a 1 or a 2/3. Superman is the first superhero to get his own title, which was monumental at the time. And some people say that Superman 1 was actually meant to be maybe a one-shot because there isn't a number 1 on the indicia or on the cover. It does reprint the first four Superman stories from Actions 1, 2, 3, and 4 with an expanded origin story in that. So, and you also get the first pinup page on the back cover of A Superhero Done. The other thing that most people may not know is the cover to Superman 1 is actually swiped from Action number 10. So if you open up Action 10, you can see that top splash is actually blown up and his pose is the exact same.
What we have in showcase number 4 is the actual start of the Silver Age. It is the Flash, but it is the Flash that we all know and recognize and has had multiple TV series now. All of the comic series since 1956 have been this version of the Flash. And so we've got Barry Allen. It's a DC comic called Showcase number 4. It's actually a perfect name for what they were doing with that title, which was they were trying to showcase either existing characters that they wanted to maybe get more interest in, or to reintroduce or to introduce new characters or slightly changed characters.
Marvel Comics number 1 is the greatest comic book ever published, and people can argue that. Martin Goodman printed this in 1939. It has a very historical significance as far as kicking off the Marvel Universe as we know it today. August 31st, 1939 is when the October printed version was printed out, sold out in 1 week, and then he printed a November edition, which was released just a week later. 80,000 on the first print run and 800,000 on the second. So a total of 880, which is about 20,000 less than all the Superman 1 combined. It's the first newsstand appearance of the Submariner, Human Torch, and also a lot of pulp characters that Goodman was already doing in the early 30s, such as the Masked Raider and Kazar.
Okay, at number 3, we've got Detective Comics number 27. In May 1939, the Dark Knight and his alter ego, Bruce Wayne, were introduced to the world. He doesn't have any superpowers other than being techie and being rich, which speaks to the strength of the character that Bob Kane and Bill Finger developed. This is the character that has remained the most popular over the longest period of time, and in terms of value is second only to one other book. And it's not the next one, but go ahead and talk about the next one, Greg.
Right now at number 2, we're talking about Amazing Fantasy 15. It's from August of 1962. And the book is Spider-Man's origin. It's Spider-Man's first appearance. It's everything Spider-Man except the title. And for many people in different age ranges, Spider-Man's going to be their number 1. He's going to be bigger than Batman. He's going to be bigger than Superman. They're going to have Spider-Man number 1. But in this list, he's number 2 at Amazing Fantasy 15.
Before I dive into number 1, I want to let you know that we are going to highlight our personal snubs, books that one of us really enjoyed, but the other 2 folks just weren't on board. So we'll get to that right after I talk about number 1. And number 1, you may have guessed, is Action Comics number 1, the first appearance of Superman and really the first appearance of any superhero. This book is the most expensive comic book in the hobby. In fact, an 8.5 copy sold recently for $6 million. Now, with that being said, let me talk about my biggest snub. And I'm really ticked off about this. And you all in the audience, think about which book that you like that would have been snubbed. So for me, it is All-Star Comics number 3, which is the first appearance of Justice Society of America. This is the first ever superhero team. And without this book, there wouldn't be the Justice League, Avengers 1, X-Men number 1, or the multitude of teams that are out there. So Ben, Greg, I respect you all a lot, but I cannot believe you all didn't talk about All-Star Comics number 3. Ben, what are you ticked off about?
Well, I will preface to say that this, I have a couple of books here that I thought were snubbed, and this is as far as cultural impact. Okay, this may not be my personal favorite, per se. I guess I'm going to go with Captain America Comics number 3 because of the Stan Lee hype that has happened over the last 20 years with the MCU and him being in every movie. And people that didn't know who Stan Lee before knew who Stan Lee was now. And then everyone traced back to what his first work for Timely Marvel was. And it was a little text type he did in Captain America Comics number 3, 1941. So that was kind of a surprise, I guess. I will have an honorable mention for Detective Comics 31, the quintessential Dark Knight cover from 1939, my personal favorite. And then I think culturally, Giant Size X-Men 1, I think was maybe a little surprise as well. So there you go.
Greg, how about you?
Oh, well, you spend all that time on Golden Age books like they matter anymore, so obviously you snubbed every modern age book. I don't have time to cover them all, so I won't cover any of them. I want to mention Spider-Man number 1. Actually, I talked about Amazing Fantasy 15. It was a one-off. It was a one-shot. It was maybe this new character's going to work. You do lots of that when you're trying out characters and how many characters didn't work. Well, Spider-Man didn't fail, and so we have somehow snubbed the series itself, Amazing Spider-Man number 1, the ongoing, the regular series. We talked about 2 different Famous Funnies or Funnies on Parades, but we only talked about one Spider-Man, and it wasn't even in the title. We snubbed our own best series for Marvel. And yeah, I will push back on your All-Star number 3. It's not like they wouldn't have figured out how to team people up. So yours is just great by default. Is it not true that Batman already had Robin at that point? So, I mean, come on.
2 certainly doesn't make a team. And actually, for all you viewers out there, you can tell that Greg is a contrarian in the way he thinks. And a few months ago, we created a video talking about a different way to value comic books. And I think it's going to blow your mind, because in this particular way of thinking, Hulk 181 is worth more than Hulk 1. You can check out that video right here. Ben and Greg, you guys are awesome, and I hope we can work together again real soon.